Welcome to the world of science fiction where extraordinary tales come to life. Enjoy the journey. The derelict warship Eclipse floated in the graveyard of dead stars, its hull cracked open like a rotten fruit. Jace Veldrin, a freelance salvage engineer, drifted through its corpse in his battered exosuit, scanning for anything valuable. The war between the Krix Dominion and the Terran colonies had left countless wrecks, and scavengers like him picked at the bones. His helmet light cut through the gloom, revealing frozen corpses, some human, most Krix, their insectoid limbs twisted in final agony. Then, a flicker on his thermal scanner. The survivor. Jace followed the signal into a collapsed hangar. There, pinned under a fallen beam, was a figure unlike any Krix he'd seen. Sleek, humanoid, with metallic blue skin that shimmered like liquid mercury. A Dominion assassin, one of their infamous Silent Ones. Her chest barely rose. One of her forearms was severed, leaking iridescent fluid. Golden eyes snapped open, locking onto him. Human. Her voice was a whisper, yet it carried the weight of a predator. "Kill me." Jace hesitated. The Silent Ones were nightmares, unstoppable, emotionless killers. But this one was broken. "Why?" he asked, kneeling beside her. Her lips curled, revealing needle-like teeth. "Because if you don't, I will kill you when I heal." A warning. A challenge. Jace smirked. "Guess I'll take my chances." He reached for his plasma cutter, not to finish her, but to free her. Her eyes widened. "You are defective." "Nah," Jace said, slicing through the beam. "Just human." As the metal groaned away, she collapsed into his arms, her body colder than space itself. And in that moment, something impossible happened. She shivered. The Eclipse groaned around them, its dying systems flickering as Jace dragged the alien assassin through the wreckage. She was lighter than he expected, her body sleek and strangely warm despite the cold metal of her skin. Every few steps, she tensed, her remaining 3 arms twitching as if fighting some invisible command. "Stop," she hissed suddenly, her golden eyes flashing in the dim light. Jace froze. "What is it?" She tilted her head, listening to something he couldn't hear. "They're coming." A chill ran down his spine. "Who?" "My kin." Her voice was flat, but there was something underneath, urgency. "Fear. If they find me like this, they will deactivate me, and they will kill you." Jace exhaled sharply. He had no weapon strong enough to fight a Silent One, let alone a squad of them. But leaving her here wasn't an option anymore. "Can you walk?" he asked. She tested her legs, hissing as her weight came down on a damaged limb. "Not fast enough." Jace cursed under his breath, then made a decision. He scooped her up, ignoring the way her claws dug into his shoulders. "Then we run." They moved through the ship's carcass, Jace navigating by memory, the assassin scanning the darkness for threats. Every shadow felt alive, every creak of metal a potential enemy. Then, a sound, like claws scraping against steel. "Down," she snarled, shoving him behind a collapsed console just as a figure dropped from the ceiling. Another Silent One. This one was pristine, unbroken, its 4 arms flexing as it landed in a crouch. Its golden eyes locked onto them, unblinking. "Designation: Zyra," it intoned. "You are compromised." The wounded assassin, Zyra, bared her teeth. "I am functional." "You are damaged. You have been touched by human weakness." The other assassin's head tilted toward Jace. The contamination must be purged. Jace didn't wait for it to attack. He fired his plasma cutter, the burst searing across the Silent One's chest. It barely flinched. Zyra moved faster than he could track. She lunged, her remaining 3 arms a blur as she drove her claws into her kin's throat. The 2 assassins crashed to the ground, a tangle of limbs and hissing fury. Jace could only watch as Zyra, broken, bleeding, tore out the other assassin's core. Silence. Zara stood, her breath ragged, her body trembling. She stared at the corpse at her feet, then at her own bloodied hands. "I should not have been able to do that," she whispered. Jace swallowed. "Why not?" She looked at him, her golden eyes flickering with something new. "Because I was not ordered to." The escape pod shuddered as it broke away from the eclipse, leaving the derelict warship and its horrors behind. Jace gripped the controls, his knuckles white, while Zara sat motionless beside him, her golden eyes fixed on the star-streaked void ahead. The silence between them was thick, charged with unspoken questions. She had killed one of her own. That shouldn't have been possible. Jace risked a glance at her. The wound where her fourth arm had been severed still leaked faint traces of iridescent fluid, but the bleeding had slowed. Her body was repairing itself, just like she had said it would. "You saved my life back there," he said finally. Zara didn't look at him. A miscalculation. "Looked pretty deliberate to me." Her fingers flexed, claws retracting and extending in an absent rhythm. Silent ones do not act without orders. We do not choose. We do not hesitate. She turned her head slightly, just enough for him to catch the faint glow in her eyes. "Yet I did." Jace exhaled, leaning back in his seat. "So what does that mean?" "It means I am defective." Or, Jace countered, "it means you're something more." Zara went still. Then, slowly, she lifted her remaining hands, studying them as if seeing them for the first time. "When you touched me," she said quietly, "I felt something. The disruption in my systems. A flaw in my programming." Jace frowned. "You mean when I carried you?" "Yes." Her voice was low, almost uncertain. "Your species emits bioelectrical signals. Weak, chaotic. But when you held me, they interfered with my neural pathways." Jace blinked. "Wait, are you saying I short-circuited you?" Zara tilted her head. "In crude terms, yes." A laugh burst out of him before he could stop it. "Well, that's a first. Usually, I just annoy people into submission." Zara didn't laugh. She didn't even smile. But something in her posture shifted, just slightly. "Your kind is unpredictable, illogical." "Yeah. Well, welcome to humanity." The pod's navigation console beeped, pulling his attention back to the controls. They were approaching the outer marker of the Iron Veil, a scavenger outpost where Jace had contacts. It wasn't safe. Nowhere was, with the Crick's dominion hunting them. But it was the only place they could regroup. Zara's gaze sharpened as the station came into view. "This is a human settlement." "Barely," Jace muttered. "More like a pile of junk held together by spite and bad decisions." "You trust the inhabitants." "Trust's a strong word, but they won't sell us out unless the price is good." Zara's claws tapped against the armrest. "Then we should not stay long." Jace nodded, guiding the pod toward the docking bay. "First, we get you patched up. Then we figure out how to keep your buddies from turning us both into scrap." Zara was silent for a long moment. Then, softly, she said, "They will not stop hunting me now." Jace glanced at her. "Because you helped me." "Because I wanted to." The pod docked with a thud, the airlock hissing as it sealed. Jace unbuckled his harness and stood, stretching stiff limbs. Zara rose beside him, her movements fluid despite her injuries. For the first time she looked at him, really looked at him, and something in her alien eyes was different. "Jace Veldrin," she said, testing his name like it was a foreign concept. "If we survive this, I will need to understand what you are." He smirked. "Good luck with that. I've been trying to figure it out for 30 years. Zara didn't respond, but as they stepped into the dim, grimy corridors of the Iron Veil, she stayed close to him. Closer than necessary. The air inside the Iron Veil was thick with the smell of recycled oxygen, engine grease, and something unpleasantly organic that Jace decided not to think about too hard. The station was a mess of welded metal and jury-rigged tech, a haven for smugglers, mercenaries, and people who didn't want to be found. which made it perfect for them. For now. Zira moved beside him, her steps silent despite the heavy boots she'd taken from a dead Crick soldier. The scavenged clothing, a long hooded coat, hid most of her metallic blue skin, but nothing could disguise the way her golden eyes glowed in the dim light, or the way people instinctively stepped aside when she passed. "We need supplies," Jace muttered, keeping his voice low. "Medjol, weapons, maybe a new ship if we're lucky." Zira's gaze flicked across the crowded marketplace. "This place is inefficient. Too many variables." "Yeah, well, efficiency isn't exactly a priority when you're on the run." A vendor nearby, a hulking Tarkian with too many teeth, eyed them a little too closely. Jace nudged Zira toward a quieter alley. "You're drawing attention," he said under his breath. "I am not doing anything." "Exactly. Normal people fidget. They blink. They don't stand like statues waiting to murder someone." Zira tilted her head. "Should I pretend?" "Yes, please." She hesitated, then forced her shoulders to slump slightly, her posture loosening into something almost human. It was the worst acting Jace had ever seen. "Nope. Never mind. Just stand behind me, and try not to kill anyone." They slipped deeper into the station's underbelly, where the lights flickered and the shadows clung too thickly to the walls. Jace's contact, a wiry tech smuggler named Rin, operated out of a backroom behind a fake noodle stall. Rin took one look at Zira and reached for the pistol under the counter. "Whoa, easy." Jace stepped between them. "She's with me." "That's a silent one." "Jace," Rin hissed. "You lost your damn mind. She's not with the Dominion anymore." "They don't leave the Dominion." Zira's voice cut through the tension like a blade. "I am defective." Rin froze. "What?" "My programming has been compromised. I no longer follow Crick's directives." She paused, then added, "Also, I require Medjol." Rin stared. Then, slowly, he started laughing. "Oh, this is beautiful. The great Jace Veldrin, tamer of killer robots." "Shut up and help us." Rin shook his head, but tossed a medkit onto the counter. "Fine, but it'll cost you. Dominion's got a bounty on rogue silent ones. Big one." Jace's stomach dropped. "How big?" "Enough to buy your own moon." Zira's claws flexed. "We should leave." "Yeah, no kidding." Jace grabbed the medkit and tossed Rin a credit chip. "Any chance you've got a ship for sale?" "Not for what you're paying." Rin leaned forward. "But there's a Viper-class raider docked in Bay 12. Owner's dead. Systems are fried, but the hull's sound. And the security." Rin grinned. "What security?" 2 hours later, they were aboard the stolen raider, its systems groaning back to life under Jace's frantic repairs. Zira sat on the edge of the cot in the ship's tiny medbay, watching as he applied the Medjol to her wounds. "You are proficient at this," she observed. "I've had practice." His hands were steady, but his mind raced. The Dominion knew they were here. It was only a matter of time before more silent ones came. Zira suddenly caught his wrist. "You are afraid." "Damn right I am." "But you are still here." Jace met her eyes. "Where else would I be?" Zira studied him, her gaze unnervingly intense. Then, without warning, she pressed his palm flat against the center of her chest, where her synthetic skin pulsed with a rhythm almost like a heartbeat. "You are still affecting my systems," she said quietly. "The disruption is not unpleasant." Jace's breath caught. "Is that good?" "I do not know." Her claws traced lightly over his fingers. "But I wish to understand it." A proximity alarm blared, shattering the moment. Jace yanked his hand back and lunged for the cockpit. The scanner showed 3 Dominion fighters dropping out of warp. "We've got company." Zira was already moving, her injuries forgotten. "Can we outrun them?" "Not in this bucket." Jace's hands flew over the controls. "But I've got an idea." "Is it a good one?" "It's terrible." He grinned, wild and reckless. Hold on tight. The Raider's engine screamed as he sent them hurtling straight toward the station's trash compactor chute, a narrow, twisting passage no sane pilot would attempt. Behind them, the Dominion ships hesitated, then followed. The stolen Raider shuddered as it plunged into the twisting darkness of the compactor chute, its hull screeching against the narrow metal walls. Jace clenched his jaw, fingers white-knuckled on the controls as he guided the ship through the jagged passage. Behind them, the lead Dominion fighter wasn't so lucky. Its wing clipped a protruding beam, sending it spinning into the abyss in a bloom of fire. One down, Jace muttered. Zira stood braced in the cockpit doorway, her claws digging into the frame. They will not make the same mistake twice. Then let's make sure they don't get the chance. He wrenched the ship into a hard roll, skimming past a spinning turbine vent. The remaining fighters adjusted, their pilots smarter than the first. They fell into formation, weapons charging. A warning blared. Missile lock. Brace. The Raider lurched as the first projectile struck, rattling the hull. Systems flickered. The lights died, plunging them into emergency red. Zira moved before Jace could react. She tore open the maintenance panel beneath the console and plunged her hand into the wiring. A spark of blue energy arced from her fingertips, and suddenly the ship groaned back to life, thrusters flaring. "Since when can you do that?" Jace demanded. "Since I became defective," she said flatly. Another missile streaked toward them. This time, Zira didn't wait. She seized the manual turret controls and fired. The shot clipped the missile's guidance fin, sending it spiraling harmlessly into the chute wall. Jace exhaled sharply. "Okay. New plan. We're not dying today." He slammed the throttle forward. The Raider surged ahead, bursting free of the chute into open space, only to face a new nightmare. A Dominion cruiser. It loomed ahead like a steel god, its weapons arrays glowing with lethal intent. "That," Jace said slowly, "is a problem." Zira's golden eyes flickered. "Their shields are at full capacity. We cannot fight. Then we run. They will track us." Jace's mind raced. The Raider was fast, but not fast enough. They needed a distraction. A miracle. His gaze landed on the station's reactor core, visible through the viewport, a massive, unstable power source humming behind reinforced plating. "Or," he said, a reckless grin spreading across his face, "we give them something else to shoot at." Zira followed his look. "Understood. That is suicide. Only if we're still here when it blows." He didn't wait for her to argue. The Raider banked hard, streaking toward the reactor. Behind them, the cruiser gave chase, its guns charging. "Hold on." At the last possible second, Jace pulled up, skimming the Raider along the reactor shielding. The cruiser, unable to stop its momentum, overshot, straight into the reactor's kill zone. Zira didn't need orders. She fired. The shot struck the reactor's weak point. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then the universe exploded. The Raider was flung forward by the shockwave, alarms screaming. Jace fought the controls, struggling to keep them from spinning into the debris. Behind them, the cruiser vanished in a storm of fire and shrapnel. Silence fell. Jace slumped back, his breath ragged. "We actually pulled that off." Zira studied the wreckage. "They will send more." "Yeah, but not today." He set a course for the nearest neutral zone, where the Dominion's reach was weak. The Raider's engines groaned in protest, but they held. Zira remained still, her gaze distant. "I should not have survived that." "Welcome to humanity," Jace said dryly. "We specialize in not dying when we're supposed to." She turned to him, her golden eyes burning with something new. "Not calculation. Not cold efficiency. I do not want to go back," she said quietly. Jace blinked. "To the Dominion. To what I was." Her claws flexed. "They will hunt me forever. I am a weapon that thinks. A failure." "Or," Jace said softly, You're the first of something better." Zira stared at him. Then, slowly, she reached out and pressed her palm to his chest, over his heartbeat. "You are still disrupting my systems," she murmured. "Is that bad?" Her lips curled, not a threat, not a snarl. A smile. "No." The raider hurtled onward, leaving the wreckage behind. Ahead, the stars burned bright and endless. And for the first time, Zara did not calculate the odds of survival. She simply watched them with him. Together.